Today's video is the second part in a series about the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. Today we will be discussing 3 more rights to taxpayers before the IRS. So join me as we talk about the Taxpayer Bill of Rights today. Hi, I'm Holland King, a tax attorney who helps small businesses and individuals with their IRS problems. Whether it's an ongoing audit or past due taxes, I'm here to help. Today's video is the second video in a 3-part series about the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. If you have not seen the first video, it may be helpful to go back and watch that first. We will be discussing the Taxpayer Bill of Rights and the next 3 rights granted under it. But as a quick recap, the 10 rights granted by Congress for taxpayers are the right to be informed, the right to quality service, the right to pay no more than the correct amount of tax, the right to challenge an IRS's position and be heard, the right to appeal an IRS decision in an independent forum, the right to finality, the right to privacy, the right to confidentiality, the right to retain representation, and the right to a fair and just tax system. In the first part, we talked about the first 3, the right to be informed, quality service, and to pay no more than the correct amount of tax. Today, we'll be discussing the next 3, the right to challenge an IRS position, the right to appeal an IRS position, and the right to finality. So let's get started. The first right that we're going to talk about today is the right to challenge an IRS's position and be heard. The IRS describes this as the taxpayer has a right to raise objections and provide additional documentation in response to formal IRS actions or proposed actions, to expect that the IRS will consider their timely objections and documentation promptly and fairly, and to receive a response if the IRS does not agree with their position. This right is one of my favorite rights under the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, because it means that the IRS can't just unilaterally make a decision. It has to not only notify you, as we've discussed in the previous video, but it also has to listen to your objection or to your challenge to that position. We have talked about the IRS notices where they will change something on your tax return. This is often prompted by additional information that they receive from third parties, such as a W-2 being updated by an employer. However, they can't just change it and send you the bill. They have to notify you, they have to give you a chance to respond, and they have to listen to what you say. I often joke with my clients that I love arguing with the IRS because they have to listen to me. And this is true. They do have to listen to me. Now, this does not mean that they are going to agree with you. If, using the example above, you receive a notice that the IRS changed your tax return because of a new W-2. You have a chance to show that the W-2 you used was the correct one. However, if it's not correct, or it has been updated since that time, then you are still going to be responsible. Now, diving into a few more examples, if you made a math error or a clerical error, you didn't subtract correctly, or you didn't add correctly, or you wrote down the number incorrectly, then the IRS is going to send you a notice and you're going to have 60 days to respond to that notice and either prove that your math is correct or agree with it and move on. Nowadays, this is less common because software does most of the actual math and fills in so many of the forms already populated, but it still happens on occasion. However, moving on to another example, let's say that you claim the earned income tax credit. The IRS doesn't think that you're qualified. It sends you a notice asking you for additional documentation proving that you are qualified. You send in some documentation, but the IRS is still not convinced. At this time, the IRS is going to send you another letter. In this letter, they're going to show the changes that they're making to your return, why they disagreed with the information that you sent in or are not convinced by it, as well as what you can do next. As a segue into the next right, the next step would be to appeal it in an independent forum. And finally, you have the right to challenge it in court. So just because the IRS has given you the chance doesn't mean that they are the end-all be-all authority on the issue. You still have other options, and this is provided under the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. So moving on to the next right, the right to appeal an IRS decision in an independent forum. This again is one of my favorite rights for taxpayers because it provides so much power to the taxpayer. The IRS describes this as taxpayers are entitled to a fair and impartial administrative appeal of most IRS decisions, including many penalties, and have the right to receive a written response regarding the Office of Appeals decision. Taxpayers generally have the right to take their cases to court. So let's split this up. Going back to the last example, the earned income tax credit that you provided documentation for, but the IRS still doesn't agree. The IRS is going to say, here's the proposed adjustment. You have 30 days in which to file a request for an appeal before the Independent Office of Appeals within the IRS. Now understand, the Office of Appeals is still within the IRS, but it's completely separate from any other department within the IRS, such as the person that you were talking to about the earned income tax credit. If you've been under audit by a field auditor, it's separate from those auditors as well. The Office of Appeals is meant to provide taxpayers another chance to be heard before they have to go forward on a court case. The Office of Appeals is set up such that taxpayers have the chance to appeal an IRS decision before the case is closed within the IRS. This is an independent office, again, so that you get a fresh set of eyes and a fresh opinion on the situation. Most often, this is your final chance to get a settlement before you have to take it to court. It can be a great place for taxpayers to get someone who is completely removed from the case to be able to hear it and see all of the evidence from a fresh perspective. And a lot of times the appeals officer is there with the intent of trying to settle the issue. So the chance of a settlement is much higher than with the field team or the exam team. Now, let's say that you appeal it and you still don't get the amount of credit that you think that you're entitled to. The next step is to take it to court. And you have a few options here, and this is beyond the scope of today's video, but quickly, you can take it to tax court and not have to pay the amount due until the tax court rules on it or a settlement is reached. Now note that if you take it to tax court and you don't pay the deficiency up front, then penalties and interest will continue accruing if the court doesn't find in your favor. If you'd prefer, you can pay the amount up front to stop penalties and interest and then sue for a refund in district court. And you can also take it to the Court of Federal Claims. Which court is right for you? That's going to be something that you need to discuss with your tax attorney. But there are options, and just because you didn't get a good result in the appeals conference doesn't mean that you are stuck with that decision. Moving on to the next right, the right to finality. The IRS describes this as taxpayers have the right to know the maximum amount of time that they have to challenge the IRS position, as well as the maximum amount of time the IRS has to audit a particular tax year or collect a tax debt. Taxpayers have the right to know when the IRS has finished an audit. There are a few nuances to this one. First, within any letter that you receive from the IRS, there should be clear explanation of how much time that you have to respond to that letter. We mentioned previously with math and clerical errors, when the IRS corrects it, you have 60 days. For other instances, it's generally about 30 days. But this is going to be stated in the letter, and you'll know immediately how much time that you have to respond. If you go outside of that time, then your options become much more limited. Next, under this right, you have the right to know the maximum amount of time the IRS has to audit a particular tax year or collect a tax debt. As a general rule of thumb, the IRS has 3 years from the time that they receive your return to audit it. There are some exceptions. There are many exceptions. We can go on all day about all of the exceptions and ways that this will be dragged out. But the general rule of thumb is that. That's how long that they have to audit. To collect a tax debt is generally 10 years from the time that the tax is assessed. If you file a return, then that's the date of the assessment. If the IRS goes in and audits you and increases the amount owed, then that becomes the date of the assessment. And they have 10 years from that date to collect on it. The good news is, at 10 years and 1 day, the tax debt goes away. The bad news is, they have 10 years to do whatever they can to collect that tax. Finally, taxpayers have the right to know when an IRS audit is finished. And there is a second part to this, actually. That when an audit is finished, taxpayers know that the IRS shouldn't come back in and audit the same issue on the same return again. Once an audit is finished, the audit is finished. When an audit is finished, you should receive a final letter from the IRS stating that they are either going to close the audit with no change, a no change report, or make some adjustments, and there will be a report of what those adjustments are and what the result of that adjustment is. If you have a deficiency, then it will tell you what to do if you disagree with that deficiency, or how to pay the amount owed. If you're going to get a refund, it's going to tell you when you should get that refund. So that concludes today's video about the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. We have discussed the right to challenge an IRS's position, the right to appeal an IRS decision in an independent forum, and then the right to finality. In the next video in this series, we will close it out talking about the final four: the right to privacy, the right to confidentiality, the right to retain representation, of course my favorite, and the right to a fair and just tax system. If you have any questions about today's video or the Taxpayer Bill of Rights in general, leave a comment below or reach out to me directly. My information is in the description. If you found this video helpful, please hit the like button or consider subscribing. I will be producing more content like this in the near future. Until then, have a good day.